Lahab also witnessed. And in conclusion, all of those dreams led into one direction or led to one point, and that was that this child, this boy, this man would become someone of a very lofty and great status. We also discussed the naming of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of how Abdul Muttalib named Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this name was something very unique to the Arabs, that they had never heard or witnessed something as such before. That's why when Abdul Muttalib named Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam Muhammad, they asked him out of curiosity or out of surprise that why did you name him something that has never been named before? So as we all discussed, that Abdul Muttalib, he had some foresight, and he had some dreams which he had witnessed to indicate towards naming Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam this exact name. Then we also discussed the kunya of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the title of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of how Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was typically known by two titles. One was Abul Qasim, and this was an indication towards his oldest son, who of course at a very young age had passed away. Abul Qasim radiallahu anhu, he passed away at a very young age, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was addressed as, his title was Abul Qasim. But in other places, another one of his titles, or another name he was addressed by, was Abu Ibrahim, because as we all know, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam youngest son, who was the son of Maria Qibtiyya radiallahu anha, he also passed away in the blessed arms of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was also known as Abu Ibrahim, because Jibril alayhi salatu wasalam addressed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam once as Abu Ibrahim. Today we move forward with the fosterhood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the suckling of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This was a tradition amongst the Arabs, that the Arabs would actually outsource their children, or they would actually give their children to women who lived in the farmlands. And this was a practice that was done amongst them, because they wanted their children to be brought up in a society or in an environment in which the children would be exposed to very pure air, pure oxygen. Along with that, they would learn the true Arabic language, and also, in addition, they would also learn the true values living in that very environment. So, about 3 or 4 days after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was not breastfed by one person. Rather, he was breastfed by about two people. One was Thuwayba radiallahu anha, and the other one is someone who will be discussing further, and a little bit extensive about her further, was Halima Sa'diya radiallahu anha. So Thuwayba radiallahu ta'ala anha was the slave woman of Abu Lahab. And when Thuwayba radiallahu ta'ala anha gave Abu Lahab the glad tidings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's birth, now of course Abu Lahab, though he was one of the greatest enemies of Islam, but that nonetheless he was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the brother of the father of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was Abdullah's brother. So this, no matter how much he hated Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam started preaching the deen, but out of happiness and the love that he had at that time for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he freed Thuwayba radiallahu anha immediately after finding out that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born. And prior to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Thuwayba radiallahu ta'ala anha also breastfed the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that was Hamza radiallahu anhu. The uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, was also breastfed by Thuwayba. So not only was Hamza radiallahu anhu the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he was also his foster brother. He was also his foster brother. And they were very close, not only in terms of their relationship, but also in terms of their age as well. Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu was only about 2 years older than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we can just imagine how close the relationship was, not only in terms of age, but also in terms of their relationship as family members. And Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, one very beautiful thing about him, and one very special thing about Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, that he was very fearless. He did not care for the person on how the person was in front of him. Rather, Hamza radiallahu anhu became Muslim solely because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was teased by Abu Jahl. And once Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu found out about Abu Jahl teasing his nephew, now remember, once again, they were very close. He found out that he was teasing his nephew. Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu walked into the gathering of Abu Jahl, took the butt of his sword and knocked him straight in the nose and broke his nose. And in front of everyone, he said, "Don't you dare mess with my nephew. Don't you dare ever say anything to my nephew." And immediately after that, he accepted Islam. Even the time of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was accepting Islam, when he had come to Darul Arqam, and this is a very lengthy story, when Umar radiallahu anhu actually approached the house of Arqam radiallahu anhu, which was considered to be the first madrasa in Islam, people would actually go there and learn from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the deen. So when he approached the house of Arqam radiallahu anhu and he knocked on the door, Arqam radiallahu anhu, along with a lot of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum who were already present, they started to shake in their boots. They were very afraid because look who's come. If Umar is here, that means there's trouble. But only one person from amongst all of them showed no fear, and that was Hamza radiallahu anhu. He said, "Let him come in. If he tries something, I'll deal with him." He said, "Let him try. If he tries something, if he comes in and tries to cause mayhem, I'll deal with him." So Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu was someone very near and dear to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And we'll learn up ahead that Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he passed away, when he was martyred in the battle, how he was treated, how his body was mutilated, and how Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, though, despite the person who killed Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Rasulullah became Muslim later on. His name was Wahshi radiallahu anhu. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam asked him very politely, saying that if you are able to do so, then please remove yourself from my gathering, because I cannot bear to look at you, because I know you are the person who killed my uncle. This is how. And now Wahshi radiallahu anhu, he felt so bad. He felt so bad that later on, he himself would say, and Wahshi radiallahu anhu, it's famous that he was also the person who killed Musaylim al-Kadhab, who was the person who claimed, na'udzubillah, he claimed prophethood even within the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even in the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Musaylima al-Kadhab, Musaylima the great liar, he claimed prophethood in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Wahshi radiallahu anhu himself would say after killing Musaylima that I killed the best person in Islam, and I also killed the worst person as well. I killed the best person in Islam, right, which was Hamza radiallahu anhu, and I also killed the worst person as well. So Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, as we could say that he was a force to be reckoned with. He was someone that upon whose bad side you didn't want to get onto. So he was the one who Thuwayba radiallahu anha breastfed right before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So not only were they bound by the relationship or the kinship of uncle and nephew, but at the same time now they were also foster brothers. They were Rada'i brothers. Habiba radiallahu anha, she relates that I once asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that I heard that you wish to send a marriage proposal to Abu Salma's daughter, Durra. Now, Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu was not only fed by Thuwayba, but there was also another person by the name of Abu Salma radiallahu anhu who also was breastfed by Thuwayba radiallahu ta'ala anha. So Hamza radiallahu anhu, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Abu Salma radiallahu ta'ala anhum were all not blood brothers, rather they were foster brothers. So Habiba radiallahu anha says that I once asked Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I heard that you wish to send a marriage proposal to Abu Salma's daughter Durra. In utter surprise, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied, Salma's daughter Durra, who is in my guardianship, even if she was not my Rabiba, meaning if she was not under my guardianship, even if she was not my daughter, my foster daughter or stepdaughter, then too she would not be halal for me. Why? Because she is my milk niece, meaning she is my foster niece. That her father, right, or her father was the person who is my foster brother. So henceforth, his daughter cannot be in wedlock with me. Her father Abu Salma radiallahu ta'ala anhu and I were breastfed by the same woman, Thuwayba radiallahu anha. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was requested to marry Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu's daughter. That would mean his cousin. Hamza radiallahu anhu was the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the daughter of Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu would be the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that too his first cousin. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam declined, saying that she is my milk or she is my foster niece. Her father and I are both foster brothers. They were both foster brothers. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was exceptionally respectful towards Thuwayba radiallahu ta'ala anha. Right? Of course, because the first thing that a child needs immediately after birth is sustenance. And now, of course, children are not able to put down or are not able to down the same amount of food or the same category of food that generally a toddler or an adolescent or a young adult or an adult can, right? So children are in need of a special sustenance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put a certain system in place for those children, and those children are taken care of by the most closest person to them, someone who carries them for 9 months, and not only that, for 2 years keeps them very close to their chests. So imagine the relationship that builds within those 2 years plus 9 months of a mother and child, right? This is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or one of the reasons why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has given the mother 3 times level status more than the father, because the mother, not only does she take the responsibility of carrying the child for 9 or so months, but also she takes the responsibility of suckling the child as well, of making sure that the child is comfortable, of making sure that the child is at ease, right? And making sure that the child is fed. Without the mother, nowadays, unfortunately, and this is a very unfortunate thing that takes place nowadays, is that motherhood has become a burden. As opposed to before, there's a very famous saying: behind every great man, there's an even greater woman. Behind every great man, there's an even greater woman. And we can see that in the life of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. The Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, actually he was born blind. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, the author of Sahih al-Bukhari, he was born blind. So his mother would make dua for him every single night, weeping and crying and making dua for her son, for his eyesight to return. So one night, due to her fervent du'as, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, the father of this ummah, came to her in her dreams, and he said to her that due to your fervent du'as, due to your frequent supplications, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has returned the eyesight of your child. So Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, that morning his eyesight had returned. Now subhanallah, if we look into the life of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah and his biography, we'll see that nowhere ever would Imam Bukhari rahimahullah travel, right? And this was very famous about him. He would never stay in one place. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah was known to travel throughout, because of course, to compile this very intricate and very detailed book, he needed to go everywhere, and he needed to meet different people. He needed to approach different teachers and scholars just so that he can get one hadith, right, and compile it into his book. But Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, despite his travels, no matter how far he went, no matter how close he was, no matter how long the travels were, he would always take his mother along with him. He would always take his mother along with him. This is the reverence that he had for his mother. This is the amount of respect that he had for his mother. So this shows us the importance of motherhood, or this shows us the importance that a child should show towards his or her mother. Because a mother, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has clearly told us the status of a mother as compared to the father. Of course, the father is important, right? Of course, the father is important. He's the one who maintains the household. He's the one who's the man of the household. But at the same time, the mother is the one who raises the next generation. So after Thuwayba radiallahu ta'ala anha was very respected by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and even after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam grew a little bit older, he would frequently send gifts to her and her household. After Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated from Makkah Mukarramah to Medina Munawwara, he continuously sent gifts, or he continuously inquired about Thuwayba radiallahu ta'ala anha and her son Masruh, right? But he would find out that Thuwayba radiallahu anha, along with her son Masruh, had passed away. So he inquired regarding her family members. He inquired as to the whereabouts of her family members. Maybe he could treat them with something. Maybe he could help them out with something. But he had also later found out that Thuwayba radiallahu ta'ala anha had no remaining family members. So, she had no remaining family members at that time. Abu Lahab was once was once seen in a dream, and of course, once again, Abu Lahab, when he passed away, right, and he was killed in the battle. When Abu Lahab was once seen in a dream, and he was in a very bad situation. He was in a very tattered state. He was in a very difficult state, and he was asked that, how are you faring? Of course, telling by his situation, telling by the way he looks, he was faring very terribly. He was in a very horrible state. He said the only thing that was is going good for me, or the only thing that is something which is worth looking forward to, is that I have been given a fingertips worth of water in the hellfire due to my pointing towards Thuwayba and freeing her. This was the only one good thing that Abu Lahab had done, and that was out of love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, out of happiness for the birth of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He freed Thuwayba, who informed him that he was born, who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born. And as I mentioned, this was a custom of the Arabs, that they would send their children out to the farmlands, out to the place, or out to the areas which were more wide open. They would never raise their children in the cities. And at that time, one woman, right, and this was actually a custom, that once a year there would be a group of women who would set out in search for children to suckle, in search for children that they would breastfeed. And and that year, when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, a caravan of women had come, and amongst those women was a woman by the name of Halima Sa'diya radiallahu ta'ala anha. She had come along with her husband, and not only with her husband, but also a child, her own child, that she was breastfeeding. And also, they came in a under very difficult circumstances. The animal, the ride that they had, was a camel that was not in the best shape, was not in the best condition, right? The camel was barely giving any milk. Also, the donkey, or the mule that they were riding, was in a very difficult state. It was very thin. It looked very in a very difficult situation. So when the women of the tribe that had come, who were originally coming to take children back with them, they were presented Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but all of them denied Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They denied Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because they thought that, what benefit could we get from an orphan who does not have a father? We won't make any money off of this family. We won't get any, and this was their profession. So they thought that we're not going to make any money off of this family. We're not going to make anything from this family. So why should we take this boy? Right? And Halima Sa'diya radiallahu ta'ala anha had the same reaction as the women did, that she passed up Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the first time. Right? She passed up Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the first time. But then afterwards, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put some type of love, or put some type of affection towards this boy, that she says herself, Wallahi la adhabanna ila dhalika al-yatim, that by Allah, I will go back towards that orphan, فَلَآخُذَنَّهُ, and I will indeed take him. لَا عَلَيْكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَجْعَلَ لَنَا فِيهِ بَرَكَةً. Then her husband, after hearing this from her, he says that, you know what, there's no haraj, there's nothing wrong with you going ahead and taking this child. Inshallah ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put barakah and blessings in this child for us. And remember, imagine this. The woman, Halima Sa'diya radiallahu ta'ala anha, when she passed to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all of the children had been taken, she didn't want to leave empty-handed, right? But at the same time, empty-handed would have possibly been in a better she would have. And imagine this. No, just a little thing that I left out was that Halima Sa'diya radiallahu ta'ala anha herself was not doing too well. She, of course, a woman, a mother, she needs sustenance, she needs food, she needs nutrition for her to be able to feed the child herself. So she herself was not being able to feed the child that she had brought along with her. And that child was crying out of anguish, crying out of pain of hunger due to the pangs of hunger, that she was not able to feed the child. So now imagine she's not able to feed her own child. How would she be able to fare and feed another child who she would be taking along with her? But subhanAllah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the love inside of her heart. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put the compassion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in her heart. So she says, Wallahi, I will go back and take the child. And her husband, in reply to this, says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will put barakah in this for us. Now, what does barakah refer to? Barakah actually refers to something which is, or goodness that is provided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a divine type of goodness. This is a goodness which a person cannot add on his own. It's directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says in a hadith Qudsi, and hadith Qudsi, just for some background, is that hadith in which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, قال Allah ta'ala, that Allah says, or فيما يرويه عن ربه عز وجل, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated. And the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, Ana inda dhanni abdi bi, that I am according to what my slave perceives of me. If my slave perceives of me as a being who is the all punisher, or someone who does not have any rahmah, that's exactly what I will be for him. Or if my slave perceives me of someone who is merciful and has that balance in between khawf and fearing me, and has that balance in between raja and having hope in me, then I will be exactly that much for him. So if a person thinks that, I'm working a job, or I am working in a place where I may not make much money, but it's better than me working in a place that could possibly give me money that is haram, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, due to this intention, could potentially put barakah in this person's rizq, in his sustenance. So due to the Rasul Halima Sa'diya radiallahu ta'ala anha taking this child, right, the complete opposite happened. The complete opposite took place. That she herself, despite her not having any food, despite her camel being very barren, it did not have any milk to provide, despite her situation, her circumstance, the amount of barakah and blessing that came along with this boy, with this blessed boy, was unmatched. Right? Halima Sa'diya radiallahu ta'ala anha herself, right? And her husband would say that, remember, O Halima, ta'alami, O Halima, wallahi ya Halima, لَقَدْ أَخَذْتَ نِسْمَةً مُبَارَكَةً, that you have indeed taken a very blessed child, indeed taken a very blessed boy. And to this she will reply, Wallahi inni la arju dhalik. And this is exactly what I hope for. By Allah, and this is exactly what I had hoped for. Now, when it had come time for the women to turn around and go back to their home, go back to the farmlands, all the travelers of their caravan had mounted their conveyances and they had set out. Halima Sa'diya radiallahu ta'ala anha had also mounted her camel, and she had this boy, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, grasped to her chest. And her thin camel, remember when they came in, her camel was such that they could not keep up with the rest of the caravan. Her camel was such, which was very thin, it had barely any energy, it was unable to keep up with the rest of the caravan. But when they were leaving, it was the complete opposite. It was completely contrary to how they had entered into the city of Makkah Mukarramah. Her camel was such that it was completely leaving everyone else's camel in the dust. Her camel was such that the mount that they had come in was such that they were able to overtake anyone who were overtaking her previously to their entrance. And the people of her caravan were stating after seeing this that, oh Halima, this is now a completely different behavior of your camel. This is completely different of how your camel was acting or how it was behaving prior to us entering into the city, right? And this is completely different. And at that time, subhanAllah, and this will be the last point inshallah before we wrap up, that at that time, there was a very huge drought that took place in Banu Sa'd. Where they were situated, there was a huge drought that had taken place. And when they had reached Banu Sa'd, there was a drought that was taking place. And when Halima Sa'diya radiallahu ta'ala anha's animals would go and be taken to be grazed in the fields, they would always, and of course, when there's a drought, there's not much grass or there's not much food for the goats or the animals to consume. But when they would come back, they would be filled, their udders would be swollen with milk. However, the other tribe members, the other people of the clan, their animals were such which they had no milk because they had nothing to eat, right? But subhanAllah, the barakah that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought into the household of Halima Sa'diya radiallahu ta'ala anha, as I mentioned, was completely unmatched. So then the owners of those animals would say that go and graze our animals in the same place that Halima Sa'diya radiallahu anha's animals are being grazed. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe they have a special area where they are having their animals feed. That's why they're having milk when they're coming home. We're not having milk. So maybe if you go there, they'll possibly have milk. But of course, this was out due to divine intervention. This was not something which was tangible, something that which could be seen. Rather, this was something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had brought into the household of Halima Saadi radiallahu anha due to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. After 2 years, Halima Saadi radiallahu ta'ala anha, she had weaned Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam for, after 2 years, she weaned Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. She had fed him for 2 years. After this, the time came to return Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to his mother, Amina bint Wahab. But due to the blessings and due to the bounties that had been in her home, Halima Saadi radiallahu anha's home, she felt hesitant to return the child. She felt hesitant to return the child. And she was very persistent after meeting Amina bint Wahab. She was very persistent to the mother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to allow her to keep the child for a couple of more days. Very persistent in keeping the child a little bit longer because she saw the blessings and barakah that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had brought into her home. But after her persistence, finally the mother Amina gave in and she allowed Halima Sa'diya radiallahu anha to keep the child for a couple of more days. And after that, the child had grown enough, right? And he was walking, he was able to go out into the fields where his milk brothers or his foster brothers were also playing. And after which, inshallah, from next week, we'll be discussing, and a little bit of a cliffhanger for everyone, we'll be discussing in those very fields was an event which took place not once, twice, but 3 or 4 times in the lifetime of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that was Shaqqu Sadr. And that was the splitting of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's chest, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent some angels, and I don't want to give too much information, inshallah, so everyone has a little bit of excitement for next week. This was a very blessed event that took place with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this became the exact same reason why Halima Sa'diya, after seeing Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, returned Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam back to his mother. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the ability to benefit. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallah wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Oh, inshallah, brothers, there will be no tafsir tomorrow due to the program we have regarding Palestine. So, inshallah, there will be tafsir will continue from next week. So, once again, there will be no tafsir session tomorrow due to our program or family night tomorrow. Jazakallah.